right, welcome everybody to Extermination Radio, the show where we talk about mapping and all kinds of other stupid bullshit. And today's probably no different. I'm your host, 40 Ounce, and I'm here today with Bauul. Am I pronouncing your name right? Is that how you say it, Bauul?
That is actually a genuinely good question. The way I've always personally pronounced it is like brawl without the R, so like ball. But I've no idea if that's right. It's just how it's always sounded to me.
Oh, okay. That's cool. All right. So, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about you, but I do know that you made a very big map and it got some press attention. This map that you made called Foresight. I saw an article on Rock Paper Shotgun, which is pretty awesome. Not a lot of people get some press attention for their maps. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that kind of took me by surprise as well. The original journalist who picked it up was Jeffrey Matelef, who is Eurogamer's US journalist, who's based on the West Coast. And if you actually look at his sort of history stuff, he every now and again will just post random stuff about Doom. I think he's a bit of a Doom fan. And I think he just so happened to be browsing the Doom subreddit at about the time that I posted my map and got a bit of positive feedback on it from there. So it was kind of a right place, right time sort of situation. And then it was one of those just sort of little stories that people go, oh, that looks quite good fun. And a bunch of other websites then picked it up and ran with it.
Oh, cool. So do you know this guy now? Do you talk to him?
Not really. I had a brief Skype sort of interview with him where he sort of asked all the questions that then cropped up in the survey, not the survey, the article.
Okay.
But after that, no, I've not had any further chance.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's really awesome. I think that's I wonder if that's that's a pretty cool thing because I would always want I would imagine that would be really awesome to see a map that you made actually be on a pretty reputable gaming website. That's pretty awesome.
It was very cool. It was a little bit sort of disconcerting in some respects because it was my first attempt and it's not the absolute greatest map in the entire world. There are much, much better maps out there. So I felt a little bit self-conscious that suddenly it was getting all this attention, and I recorded myself just playing through it on YouTube just because I thought the dozen people who might want to watch it might find it interesting. And it's passed 100,000 views. And it kind of a bit no, dude, there are better WODs out there than this.
Whoa.
Go explore those. Don't just watch mine. Although shout out to the one guy from Nigeria who actually watched through the whole hour and a half of it without any breaks. He was a dude.
That's amazing, man. That's more views than pretty much all of my views combined for all of my videos. That's pretty amazing. I was just looking at I was looking at your thread for it, and you posted some statistics. 8,000 sectors. Wow, man. How long did it take you to make something like that?
It took a long time. It was about 18 months or so on and off from when I sort of decided to do it. And a lot of that was kind of finding my way back through Doom mapping because it had been about 10 years since I'd made anything before that. Maybe 15 or so. And certainly I'd never actually created a proper map. I just messed around in DOS-based map editors where, you look at it the wrong way and they crash. So I'd never really gotten very far. It was one of those things where I had the idea in my head for what the map should be. And once I sort of had made a little bit of it that kind of fit into one section, I knew I had to fill out the rest of it. And I couldn't just sort of leave it half done to kind of fit in my head what it's supposed to be. And there was quite a lot where I'd just be looking at a blank space going, I'm just going to have to come up with something different to put here, which is kind of a bit obvious when you play the map, and it gets a bit weird by the end of it because I was just desperately trying to fill space. But it was one of those things that I couldn't kind of back away from what the original vision was, or I would have felt like I hadn't really done justice.
Yeah. I've had a conversation with somebody before, and they had a mapping style kind of like that. He was asking me to play test his map, and that was the impression that I got from him. That he started on something, and then he didn't realize that I guess he didn't anticipate that he was going to be making a map this big, and then like he started detailing on it, and like as you kind of play it, the beginning half of it is like really well detailed, and then like the second half started to get kind of bland. Like he ran out of ideas by the time he got halfway through it, and I guess he didn't anticipate that he was going to be making a map this big. Does that sound like something that kind of happened to you? Is that like you kind of like you had no idea you were making something this big until you were like too deep into it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more the when the map starts, it kind of has a cohesion to it. You know, you're in an underground base and you're starting the sort of the military section. There's a control section, and then the next area is like sort of the mess halls and where all the soldiers lived. And there's a library that has a spine running through the middle of it. I don't know why. I just thought it looked cool. And then it kind of, there's another bit and there's a cavern, and you then randomly go into a place that's supposed to be a prison, but it's actually just a remake of the Tower of Latria from Demon Souls, because I thought it was a cool level. And then it just ends up being hellish, and there's marble, and I mean, I'm quite happy with what I did, but the cohesion just disappears by the end of it. It's like, I've run out of textures. I'm just going to have to go with the marble set. There's nothing left.
That's funny. I actually haven't gotten to play the map, and part of the reason is because it's like really big, and it's nothing personal or anything. It's just I have a preference towards shorter maps, and I don't always have a lot of time to play Doom. In fact, I haven't played Doom in weeks because I've been doing these podcasts instead. But it's always been fun to talk about Doom. But yeah, I have a preference towards like shorter maps, and I always try to keep my maps like pretty short. And is that something that's kind of like interesting to you? Do you like really long maps, or do you I don't know, what do you think? Do you like really long maps? As far as playing goes, I mean.
As far as playing, certainly after playing through Foresight a lot, I much prefer shorter ones now. I was kind of my own lesson. It's like, no, this is too long. Even if I'd just broken it down into sort of little chunks, like I think, is it Desvault 2 that kind of is existing as a single giant map, but then there's a version where there are 4 mini maps?
Yes, I think that's Desvault 1.
That's Desvault 1, that's right. That probably would have been, in hindsight, a better way of doing it, just to kind of break it up into chapters a little bit more. I think I kind of wanted to make this more a bit of an experience where people sort of, you know, delve down into it, and there's a bit of architectural narrative to it that I've always sort of enjoyed in games. So you can sort of, you get an impression of the story as you went through it. It just ended up being really big, and especially given the kind of the plot, for what it's worth, sort of fell apart by the end of it. Nowadays, I much prefer to make stuff that never, at most, takes 20 or 25 minutes to play through, even if that's a little bit too long. Certainly, I've got my fill of giant maps for the time being.
That's pretty cool that you kind of have like the story behind your map. I always thought like mapping is like a very cool storytelling medium. It's very fun, very, very cool idea, like that, to kind of like create a story. It's fun, like when you read. I used to play a lot of like 1994 WADs, and in like the text files for them, they'll have like this long background story where they like explain everything that's going on. There's like, this is your mission, soldier, and like they tell you like that you're this guy and you have this job and you're at this station and you don't like your job, and like there's all kinds of like little details and stuff, and kind of like it kind of carries the fun in the map, because you're kind of like, you're not just there to kill monsters. There's also kind of like a storyline that follows with it too.
Yeah, modern maps don't seem to do that nearly as much, and I think perhaps there's a little bit that maybe some people feel a bit like silly writing a WAD. You know, here's a cool WAD, and here's the backstory to it, and you are Gruff Marine number 4, and you're outside the gate. Especially the kind of the classic Doom story can get a little bit cliched. But I actually completely agree with you. I think one of the sort of, because of the limitations of the Doom engine, which in itself brings out a lot of creativity in people, because you can't really tell stories in it. You can't have cutscenes. I mean, in classic Doom, obviously you can do all that stuff in Zedom, whatever.
Right.
But in sort of the more classic stuff, you can't have cutscenes, you can't have dialogue, you can't have text. If you want to play a story, you have to do it through the architecture itself, through the way the level progresses and the geometry, and just Also, because Doom kind of lends itself to the surrealist, more sort of abstract kind of view,
Yeah.
it sort of gives an impression. It leaves you with a feeling more than anything else.
Mm.
And I mean, if you look at something like, the original Doom, the way the episodes flowed out, they did that very well with the absolute minimal of text to kind of show it. And it's one of the things that I think Doom is slightly underappreciated in, is that it is a very effective storytelling game. In a way, it will take you on a slightly kind of emotional journey, not emotional like tears or whatever, but it will give you a sense and a feeling of place that gets sort of lost when it's a really like later first-person shooters that have super generic levels and try and pad it out with lots of exposition on the text. I think you look at these sort of the older FPSs, and Doom's a good example of how relying on the architecture itself actually is a far more rewarding experience.
Yeah. You were right earlier when you said that it seems like this is something that's kind of lost in modern maps. I do see that a lot of people are just kind of going strictly for the gameplay concept of it, or just like the good looks, but there isn't really a lot of content or backstory with it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I like to see people focusing on gameplay and making their maps look cool. But there is kind of like, maybe there is, I don't know for sure, but it does seem like there's a little bit of a lost element to Doom, at least like the very the depth of Doom, as far as like kind of like the storyline goes. When that's kind of lost when you don't really take much into account of like what the background story is of your WAD, and you just go strictly for good level design and gameplay.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially given, I mean, the engine has been stripped down to its bone. Even basic mappers, when they look at it, we see sectors and line defs and ACS scripts, and we see ones and the zeros, and because the engine is so bare bones, it's very easy to just look at that and look at the mechanics of it and the gameplay of it, which is obviously extremely important. But I think you're right. There is something of a lost art. People going, so what is the story here? Like, what are we trying to make the player feel, other than I'm good? It's good fun to shoot stuff, which it obviously is. But Doom has the capacity for great atmosphere, like really good atmosphere. I still occasionally go back and play episode 1, and it has a certain vibe to it. It has a sort of sense to it that gives you a real sense of place and a sense of mystery about it. And some of that could be nostalgia from the first time we all played it, and oh my god, it's an invisible demon, what the hell kind of moments. But there is a bit of a lost art of actually sort of thinking about what's the story here.
It is.
And
it is fun to play Doom in that way, to like kind of like imagine, like because you're right, episode 1 does have, it doesn't, Doom does get like depicted as like kind of like this game where it's just straight action all the time, and that does make up maybe like a good majority of it. But there's also like there's all these like really like creepy ambient parts too, like where there's like, if you were to look at episode 1, like the computer maze in level 2, nuclear plant, where you're just kind of like wandering around in the dark and there's just flickering lights, and but then there's other parts like in E1 M6 central processing, where you get the red key. There's like barrels and stuff everywhere. It's just this huge. You're just going to war with all these monsters at once, and there's a striking balance between not just straight action, but also like these like the suspense and stuff that follows in between, and it does create like a very interesting narrative, and it kind of gives you like, you feel a little more in touch with the player that way.
Yeah, to try and pull all the different elements together to evoke a sort of powerful sense. And I think another good example of where you can clearly see the original, when id were pulling it all together, they kind of were thinking more about atmosphere than pure gameplay, is something like E1 M8, Phobos Anomaly, which is just, it's all basically building up to, you're going to shoot a couple of barons. I mean, that is literally the whole point of the level. But they have a long intro to it. You have this part where you blast some barrels and kill a load of demons, and it almost kind of reduces the demons in danger. Like, the opening room is, okay, here's a bunch of demons, you can just kill them like that. But what you face next is going to be more dangerous. And it's that kind of very subtle storytelling that requires a bit of thought, I think,
Yeah.
and it's easy to kind of look past it and just go, no, we'll just have a room of barons and you blow them up. It's fine. But they really put a lot of thought into making it a boss level that we all remember, and it has the creepy music, and it has, sort of the secrets in places, and the long corridor that has the red lift at the end. It's a very visually striking little level. That I think in sort of a lot of modern WODs, obviously there are some that sort of do this, but it's tempting to kind of overlook taking the time to produce something like that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how they do it in so few sectors too. Like I really don't think like E1M8 is a pretty small map, and it's not even very very detailed either. And there's only like a few. I mean, there's probably less than 100 sectors in the entire thing. And it is a really very powerful map. That's cool.
Yeah.
What kind of WODs do you prefer? Like, what are some of your favorites? I know you just mentioned Deus Vault. Then maybe that's not your favorite, but do you have like some favorite WODs that you think kind of capture everything you'd like to see in a Doom map? That's a tough question.
It is kind of a tough question. It's hard to say. I kind of missed out, I think, on a lot of the really, really big, cool WODs.
That's right. You said you started mapping really early, right? So like you've been like a little bit involved in Doom like since like almost the very beginning?
Yeah, my sort of history with Doom mapping is bookended. So when the game first came out, I got myself, maybe my dad bought me actually, a book published by the Wake Group called the Doom Construction Kit, which is not the same as the map editor. It was just the name of the book, and it was this massive, thick manual that basically was it was just talking about how to edit Doom. And it came with a CD that had a bunch of really early editors on them. There was DU, like 1.2 or something. They're all DOS-based. There was one called DMUS, that was a music editor, and DText, I think, for the text editor. It also had DHacked 3.0, which had just introduced mouse control, which was revolutionary at the time. So I did a lot of tinkering around back then when the game sort of came out. I think of all of those, DHacked was the one I spent the most amount of time with, just because DU, the map editor, was so flaky. I couldn't work out, whenever you tried to put an exit switch in, it seemed to crash. So the only way to finish a level was just to put Romero heads everywhere. I mean, that was it. It was the only way out. So it was really badly done. So I played a lot of Doom around then, sort of edited it. But then when by the time Quake 2 came out, I sort of migrated on to making maps for that, with QE Radiant and those sort of more modern editors. So I did a bunch of maps for Quake 2, I did a bunch of maps for Quake 3, I did a bunch of maps for Doom 3 as well. And then I sort of ran out of, basically, because it stopped making, games for a while, I sort of ran out of motivation to continue map editing. And it was only a good while later, like 2 or 3 years ago, that I was watching a YouTube review of one of those terrible WODs, those Terry WODs that get reviewed online. Yeah. Like, oh my god, isn't this awful? And there was one where basically the review is just like some guy going, I made this in a day, I'm drunk, my wife left me, so I just produced a terrible map. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if some drunk, sad guy can churn out a functional map with, like, decorate-powered custom enemies in one day, surely I can make something a bit better than that. And that's kind of when I got back into it and, picked up Doom Builder 2 and was absolutely amazed that it could show stuff like what texture you assign to a floor from within the editor. It was amazing. It was so much better than what I was used to. So then I sort of picked it all back up again, and that's only been like in the last 2 years or so.
That's pretty amazing. I got into when I first got into Doom mapping. Doom Builder 1 was like the hot thing, and it didn't have the you couldn't see the floors on the sectors, but I was very privileged as a new mapper because it came with 3D mode. So you could float around and put the textures on the walls. I had no idea when I first started, I had no idea that there was such a thing as like upper, lower, middle textures. I didn't even understand it, and I just knew that I could float around the map and just put the textures wherever I wanted them. So like I got in. So when I got into mapping for the first time, I actually had to like I had a lot to learn to actually learn like the more the ins and outs and how the map editor and stuff work. But you said your first introduction to mapping, you got this book called Doom Construction Kit, and that's not related to the editor. I always thought they were sort of like kind of hand in hand. Are they two totally different things?
Two completely different things.
I didn't know that.
don't even. I mean, it's actually one of those weird things that if you go on the wiki and type in Doom Construction Kit, the wiki page for the map editor shows the picture of the book, which is just, it's not, they're not, as far as I'm aware, they're not remotely related.
Whoa.
To the extent that I didn't even know that there was an editor called Doom Construction Kit until quite recently, because it wasn't included with the book. That was Doom Editing Utility, or DEU, was the one that was on there. In fact, I think the map editor might have even come after the book, to be honest. The book was like really early in the lifestyle.
Oh, okay. So you don't really have any experience using Doom Construction Kit?
No, never used it at all.
But DEU, that's funny. I'd never used DEU before, but I've seen screenshots and stuff of it. Was it awful? I can imagine it was pretty terrible.
It was DOS based. It ran at about it's probably lower resolution than Doom was. It was like 300 by 200 or something. It barely supported mouse controls, and everything was really manual. I think you had to place the vertices individually, then you had to place all the line defs individually, then you had to give them side defs, and then you selected a bunch of them and made a sector, and that was the way it went through it. And if you missed one of those steps, the map would crash, wouldn't load, and you wouldn't know why.
Whoa, that's crazy. And in Doom Builder 2 now, you can just, or like in GZ Doom Builder, you can draw like a half a sector and it'll finish the shape for you.
Yeah, it's crazy easy in comparison. All these modern mappers have no idea how easy they have it.
Yeah, when you think, and it's so weird because I've seen like threads where threads on Doomworld where we discuss like the rate at which maps are coming in to Doomworld, and I don't think the past like couple years we've been seeing so many new maps and all kinds of new big projects and stuff, but it still pales in comparison to how many maps were made like in the 1994 era, like right when Doom was still pretty new. Like there were so many maps being made, and I guess we really don't give those mappers enough credit considering the garbage tools that they had to deal with.
Yes.
Because there's so many people that say they just hate 1994 WADs. They can't give them, they can't give those mappers the time of day. It's just not worth it. And I don't personally agree with that. I like to play 1994 maps because I think there's a lot, especially because it probably took so much longer to make a map. I feel like there's probably a lot more energy and imagination put into it as compared to what maps are made today, because you can kind of just shit out a bunch of textures shit out a bunch of sectors without even really thinking about it and get it like a pretty decent map done in a short amount of time. And you don't even take the time to like actually think about what the story is behind it and stuff. But
yeah.
It's
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just I don't know. I do really like 1994 maps for that reason.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also having to work within true vanilla limits takes a kind of patience and creative approach to stuff that I fully almost applaud of people doing it. I remember there was one old one. I think it's called Cloud City. Something like that.
Right.
And it was sort of based, it was supposed to be like this floating city idea, and it had a custom sky texture that was extended sort of all the way up and all the way down. So when you went to the edge of the city and kind of looked out, you just saw blue sky everywhere. And that was kind of quite mind-blowing at the time. Anyway, and there was this area where you went into a room and there was a baron, and instead of the baron just kind of stood in a room, the mapper had kind of carved out like a jagged hole in the wall, like almost like the Baron had kind of dug its way into the wall and left this kind of carved area at the back. I mean, in reality, it was just a bunch of sectors next to each other with sort of custom heights, all the rest of it. But I remember looking at that going, oh my, that must have taken so much thought and effort to really get it, A, to work, B, to look good, to not have any kind of Visplane overflows or anything like that. And also to kind of just spend the time to go, well, why is the Baron in here? Has he been locked in here? If he has been locked in here, perhaps he spent the last God knows how many years trying to dig his way out, and this is the results. Yeah. And that kind of ties back to what we were sort of talking about earlier, that maybe when you have fewer resources to work with, you have to think far more about what does this specific room say about the level, and not just, oh, it's a room with stuff in it.
Yeah, it's true. Like, because if the map editors are so easy now, I mean, we see like Slaughterfest maps and stuff. So if you see like thousands and thousands of monsters, you don't think this is like somebody's planning this army. You just think somebody used copy paste and placed a bunch of monsters in a room, and there's really not much depth to it than that.
Yeah, and I also think that sort of thinking about this kind of stuff and having a room that tells a story or whatever is not necessarily the same as putting vast amounts of detailing in. I think some people get kind of hung up that they sort of think they could create a simple room and then they can bring it alive by putting huge amounts of mid-texture trim in there or lots of really intricate sectors in the corner or whatever. But when the actual fact is, if you just kind of take a step back and think about the broad strokes of it, you can create an area that kind of tells a story and says something with relatively simple, sort of sector designs, a number of sectors and textures in the use and all the rest of it. Which is exactly what the id guys did way back when they made probably Doom 1 more than Doom 2 a little bit, which does kind of go a bit random at times. But it is something to be said of broad strokes can do more than sort of using 300 detailed textures in a single room.
Yeah. So you got into mapping like really early. Did you release anything back then, or did you just kind of like mess around with the editor?
I didn't release anything publicly. I didn't have the internet back then, so I couldn't release anything anyway. I did produce some like deathmatch maps that me and my younger brother and his mate used to play. We had a PC sort of downstairs, a PC in my room, then a PC kind of up in the loft, and we had like a giant 30-foot Ethernet cable that we'd run up and down the stairs, much to my mother's chagrin, because she kept tripping over there. I remember like one glorious Sunday, we'd just spend like 6 hours on this one very simple level I made, just sort of playing deathmatch. I think the final scores were something like 3,000 frags each, something like that. But so that was all my experience, sort of way back in the original versions of Doom. I didn't really get the internet. My first ever online game of anything was Quake World, like a couple of years later. So I was kind of behind the times that.
Yeah, when I first found out about deathmatch for the first time, I was like obsessed with it too, because I was able to create deathmatch maps with my when I first got into like figuring out like I played Doom for the first time like way back in 1993, but I was like 3 years old at the time, so like I played I played like knee deep in the dead with all the cheat codes and stuff turned on, and that was like the most of my experience. But I came back to it when I was about 13 or 14. That's when I found out about Doom World and all the editors and stuff and source ports and all those things. And I created my own deathmatch map for the first time, and I created like this kind of like city level, and it wasn't like it wasn't even good by today's standards. Like it was like all the buildings looked the same. And it was very easy to get lost. It was a very big level. But I found out that you could play Z-Doom with these Z-Cajun bots. So I played deathmatch with these bots for like hours and hours and hours. And I had close to like 3,000 frags too. And I guess that's probably the answer to like why there's so many like deathmatch WODs on the id Games archive that are just junk. There's like nothing good about them. But I guess when you make your first deathmatch map, deathmatch is so fun by itself. It doesn't even matter if the map is terrible.
Yes, that is true.
That's cool. You got to play deathmatch with your brother in a little LAN party. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it took a while to get all set up right. I can't even remember. Sort of if we were using Oh, I think we may have even been using Doom 95, everyone's favourite port of the game, to try and get it working. Everyone sort of shits on Doom 95, but I really liked the launcher for it. When you loaded it up and it had the cool double wide picture using the bunny title pick at the end, and it had the little marine at one side and the cyber demon at the other shooting a rocket.
Yeah.
I thought that was really awesome. That picture, I really liked it.
Me too. Because when I first found out about Doom 95, before that I was running Doom through DOS. I was like 4 years old. My brothers had to like try and teach me how to like use the command prompt to type in, like to go to from C drive to the Doom folder to type in Doom.exe. Yeah. And like they had to like write down a list of commands I had to do, and it was so confusing to me at the time. And like when I found out about Doom 95 after we had gotten like Windows 95 or 98 or whatever, I was so like blown away that you could just pick whatever level you wanted to go to and start from there instead of playing through the game from the beginning, because I had no idea about like all the command line arguments and stuff either. And you could pick respawn monsters and fast monsters and stuff. And I remember like when I got back into Doom when I was about like 12 or 13, I was using Doom 95 too. And I loaded up Doom 2 and I just picked whatever level had like the coolest name. So I found like Industrial Zone, and I played that with respawn monsters on, and I turned on IDDQD and I turned on ID Behold, and I just ran around punching zombies in the streets for hours and hours and hours. And I wish I had thought to take screenshots of it, because it would be so funny if you looked at it, because I was playing this map for so long that I was only using Berserk, so my ammo was already maxed out. So there was just all these clips and shotguns left behind, and it got to a point where they were just like covering all of the land, and there's so much land and so many monsters, and there was just all these clips and stuff left behind, to the point like they were starting to flicker in and out because there was just so many sprites on the screen. The game couldn't even take it. And I was just so hooked on that, just doing that over and over again. There's something to be said about Doom when you can be doing the same thing for hours and hours and hours and hours and not get bored of it.
I completely agree. Everyone has a memory of being somewhere, like on a map, on one of the original early Dooms, and just playing it for hours on end. Like we used to do that with the Icon of Sin on Doom 2. Ultraviolence, all the cheat codes on. And I remember the time that we first discovered that if you keep playing it long enough and you keep killing enough monsters, there's an overflow on the spawner where they stop spawning at their designated spawn spots and just start popping out of the map origin, which is like somewhere over to the left out in the void somewhere. And funnily enough, actually, I'd never played it quite long enough to get that, but there was a mate of mine who apparently had, and he came up to me in the school next day and said, I was playing the Icon of Sin for like 9 hours last night, and you wouldn't believe it, but I played it so long, all the monsters started appearing like off in the corner, like, in a sort of a hidden room at the side. And I thought he was just shitting me, the way that teenagers do. I was like, no, bullshit, no way.
Yeah.
That's never happened. I've never seen it. That's nonsense. And then it was like years and years and years later, like 6 months ago or something, there was a thread on, it's one of the Doom World threads, it's something about Doom you just found out, or, confessions or something like that. And I sort of asked the question, it's like, was this guy shitting me, or did it actually happen? And someone pointed me to the wiki link where it genuinely is true. It genuinely does happen. And I felt so bad that I had, like, not believed him for 20 years. I thought he'd been lying to me about this all that time. I hadn't spoken to him in, like, 6 years, but I dropped him a Facebook message and said, you probably don't remember this, but you were right. There's a monster overflowing the Icon.
That's hilarious. You had to call him and be like, hey, man, you were right. There was a lot of monsters on that. That's so funny. Oh man, that's crazy, man. But yeah, even after all this time, I never get bored of Doom, and I'm such a like a vanilla and like I play vanilla Doom and boom wads and stuff because I don't care about new monsters. I'm still in love with the game just as it is. I love all the same guns, all the same monsters. I can kill them any million thousands of times, and I can still be entertained. It's just I don't know what it is about Doom. It's just that it's that much fun for me.
Yeah, there's something about the original, well, including Doom 2, but like the original Beast 3 that just does not get boring. And yeah, variations are nice, but I've never sort of played, even now, I'll still play, I'll shoot my millionth Mancubus or whatever. I never thought I wish there were more monsters. There doesn't feel like there needs to be any more monsters. I'm not going to object if people want to put other stuff in. It's always a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But the game just doesn't feel like it needs them necessarily.
Right. Yeah. There's so much to do with what's already there, and we see that in like Slaughterfest and stuff. But what I really get a kick out of lately is traps, because it's not so much fighting the monsters themselves, it's the presentation of the monsters and how they kind of like, you can kind of lure the player into a situation, and then like a door opens and then you're fighting a bunch of revenants at once, instead of just kind of like going into a room and there's already 100 in there and you just kind of blow them away with the plasma gun. It's the act of actually like kind of tricking the player into thinking something is going to happen and then doing something else instead. That's what's really fascinating for me lately.
Yeah, the monsters are, because of their AI and how a lot of them work, you just put them in a room and have the player walk in. We've done that so many times, it isn't particularly interesting, but I rapidly discovered when I sort of started creating Foresight how easy it is to even just use a handful of enemies and create a completely deadly trap that the player has absolutely no chance of getting out of. It's like, wow, they are really, really deadly, really fast if you are feeling a bit mean. It's not hard to make something really challenging.
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. If you look even in Doom 2, map 13, the factory, there's this part where there's a soul sphere, and you can take a teleport, and it'll just take you to this like this tiny little like cross shaped room where you have 4 imps at each end of the cross, and you're right in the middle, and that can kill you instantly just by showing up. No matter almost no matter what weapon you have to be really on your guard and know this is going to happen. But if you play kind of blind and you don't know that teleport's going to take you there, you can die right there then and there within seconds, and that's just 4 imps.
Yeah, there is definitely something to be said of, certainly when one is playtesting your map, the difference between knowing something is going to happen and being able to handle it, and not knowing what's going to happen at all. It makes so much difference, far more difference than I think it's initially apparent when you've been playtesting it 100 times or whatever.
Yeah, is that something you had to deal with in your map? I remember you made a thread where you were like asking about like people's ability to like kind of navigate a map. And I guess is that like a challenge that you had to deal with when you were testing your map, like kind of having to watch other people play your map too? Was that kind of annoying for you?
That was, I mean, in hindsight, that thread was probably creative, and I was feeling a little bit grumpy, because it came from inexperience, because it genuinely was my first map, and
it was a valid question.
Sorry?
It was a very valid question.
I think it was a sense that I watched every stream I could of the map, and because it had sort of mainstream coverage, there were a lot of people who didn't really play Doom all that much. Like they all played it with Brutal Doom, and they kind of played it quite casually. And I think I watched like a couple of clearly, sort of proper players who were like, oh, it's a limit removing map, so I'll play it with, PR Boom Plus or whatever. And those guys had no trouble navigating it at all. They recognised what switches looked like. They knew sort of roughly where to go. They could look at an auto map and go, okay, I'm here, it's there. They could remember the route and just go there. And I think that's how I sort of envisioned it being played, possibly because I didn't think anyone really outside the community would play it. But it was fascinating watching the other 90% of the Doom players out there, the casual players, approach it, and just how easy it was for them to walk past open doorways, or just not look at switches, or just go into a room, go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, just turn around and walk out, and then get lost in a different part of the map for 10 minutes when they literally looked at where they should have gone, but then just didn't. And it was, I mean, in my sort of mind, you explore everywhere in a Doom map. That's how I play. Like, if there's an open area, I'll go down there. That's because I'm not going to leave anywhere unexplored.
Yes.
But I actually, like, one of the big learnings from it is that's not how a lot of people play. A lot of people, if they don't think they have to go somewhere, they won't go there. They are specifically looking for the way out. And if they think the way out is in one corner of the map, they won't go exploring the other 3/4 of the map. They're going to go and just spend all their time in the one place. And it was frustrating to watch, but it was also actually quite important to learn that different people approach things in a different way. And they all do it at a million miles an hour, so they don't stop to think about this is the layout of the level, this is kind of what it's supposed to be happening. I have this whole sort of idea where if you actually sort of play the map, there's a big central corridor, and at the very end of it is the exit. And it says exit at the end of it, but granted it's slightly further away, so you might not be able to see it. And there are 5 identical, very big, very grand switches kind of scattered around the map. One of them is when you first walk in, it's there on the right, and I was like, okay, I'm going to teach the player this big-ass switch, this is what you need to be paying attention to. And then there's the same design at the end of the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter. And each time you flip a switch, it opens part of the exit level and the next quarter. And I sort of thought, that's not a difficult concept. People should, the first switch you go to, you click it, and it opens the first quarter. So if you find the next one, it will open the next quarter. And about 2/3 maybe of the people I watched playing got that, and they go, okay, this is for the next quarter. Honest to God, there were a decent number who would get to the end of the first quarter, hit the big switch, exactly the same style as they won earlier, and go, I have no idea where to go now. Even though the door behind them had opened, and you would have thought, okay, you just go through the newly opened door. They just kind of ran around in circles, being lost and confused. And it was hard not to just kind of go, well, they're idiots. And maybe the first person I watched, I kind of think that, but it happened enough that I was like, okay, this is important to remember, that you don't just put signposts, put flashing neon signposts about where people have to go. Make it really obvious what the route is, and don't just expect that people will find the way merely through the virtue of the fact they're going to explore everywhere, because people don't, as weird as that is.
Yeah, well, it's true though, because like in like newer games and stuff, you're really not as encouraged to explore as you're used to. Like they really do hold your hand, they show you what you're supposed to be doing, and that's always driven me crazy, because I've watched some people play like pretty modern games, and it seems like you're just kind of playing this long hallway, and you're just like they're just connected by cutscenes, and it's just they're just telling you the story, and there's really no way to deviate from the story because there's only one way to go, and it's just like what am I doing? Like I'd rather be watching a movie than just following this straight line if I'm not doing and using any of my own navigating skills to figure this out. This is just an interactive movie to me. But yeah, I get that. I know exactly where you're coming from, because I've had maps that I've made before. I remember one of the projects I worked on that this community project I hosted called Mutiny is based on kind of an older WOD called Strain, which is like the cyberpunk kind of theme thing, but it was they're pretty old maps, and there's a lot of like puzzles and stuff involved with them. So I was like, I definitely want to, in the maps that I make, I definitely want to incorporate some sort of puzzles where you really have to think. And when I watched the first time demos of people trying to play that map, it was just such a nightmare, because they were just not getting that they were in a puzzle, and they did not understand what things were doing. They didn't realize that was part of the puzzle, and it was just really difficult to watch, to like see them like so blatantly confused and like obviously frustrated about this map when like the clues to the puzzle were so obvious to me, and it was it was so frustrating to watch. So I know what that's like.
Yeah, there is also an element, I think, that people go into Doom presuming they can play it at full speed. that they can just hold go, and they will just go to where the monsters are, and they will shoot the monsters, and that'll be that. And people don't always kind of go, okay, I'm going to take this a bit slower. I'm going to sort of learn my way around and look what's happening out there. And I think that I do play a little bit slower like that. I like to really look at the architecture and really sort of, I suppose as a mapper, I like to see what other people do. But I take my time with it. I explore everywhere. I sort of look around. And a lot of people don't. And a lot of people just presume what they see in front of them is the way forwards. Possibly because Doom has been about running forwards and shooting stuff for quite a lot. The sort of people aren't expecting to have something that requires a little bit, not so much thought, but just to take it a bit slower. Yeah. And you almost need like a warning at the beginning, like, take your time and look about. If you rush through this, you will be lost, sort of message or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's really like no effective way to communicate that, even like in a Doom map. I mean, because nobody reads the text files anymore. So like even if you do say that, no one's going to read them. And so like I don't know what you do. Do you like create a giant texture and like completely break the fourth wall and communicate directly to the player and tell them, hey, you're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this. I don't even know how to respond to that. But it's weird though, because I played the new Doom 2016 recently, and like the approach that I took that I learned from playing like Doom 1 and 2, which was to like examine and look for places to explore. I found myself getting distracted by every insignificant little thing, because there's so much detail in the game. So like I would look around and like I would try to interact with every single computer I saw, and there was like these valves sticking out of pipes, and I'm like, oh, this is probably a switch. And I always like I spent like way longer on most of the maps than I really should have. And it felt silly playing in a Doom game, because like they're encouraging you to play this really reckless way. But I'm so used to playing Doom 1 and 2, which is very under detailed in comparison. And I was just so distracted by all the details that I figured that I was supposed to interact with everything that I could see.
Yeah, I did exactly the same thing. I think my first playthrough of the new Doom was something like 25 hours, just because I spent ages exploring every possible thing, because for exactly the same reason. It's what we sort of taught to do in the very original games, is to explore it. Doom is an exploration game as much, at least the original game is as much an exploration game as it is a shooting game. And so we kind of went into the new Doom in kind of the same way. Let's explore everything. And oh, no, it's 99% scenery. Oh, well.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like a challenge with newer games, because I do see a lot of new games that come out and they are like super detailed that like I don't, like when you look at like Doom, for example, even though it is like pretty under detailed, but it's not just the like the architecture and the level of sectors and stuff, but there's also the textures too. There's a lot of like really plain textures that look like they're just flat surfaces. You can't do anything with them. And then there's other things where there's like computers with all sorts of little buttons and stuff on them, and those are the things you know to interact with. And I wonder if there's like it strikes me when I look at like some modern games that they're just so detailed that it looks like you can like you're supposed to interact with every single thing you see. And that's just like that's something that's like almost drawing me away from like modern video games, is that there's so much to look at and so much content involved that like I don't even want to waste the time to like be distracted by all of it. And so like I wonder if there's like, I don't know if there's like some sort of a balance that can be achieved where like things that you're not supposed to see or that you're not supposed to use have to like be less detailed. I don't even know if that's even a possible thing anymore, just because there's so much competition to make the best looking game. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, there are modern examples of games that actually do that really well. Like I was kind of a bit similar to you. I was sort of slightly giving up on sort of modern games. I just didn't think. I thought we'd kind of gone in the wrong direction and lost a lot of what the good experiences was from the 90s, until I played Dark Souls, and then that all came rushing back. And funnily enough, I'd actually say that the game that most made me feel like playing Doom in like the last 5-10 years is Dark Souls, which is a really weird comparison, but they take the same itch for me. And if you ever sort of play that, it's a similar kind of thing that the interactive stuff is clearly marked because they're like giant switches, or like levers or something. Any items you pick up are glowing orbs. You know, they don't even have sprites or anything like that. They're just big sort of glowing orbs. But then the detail is actually held way back, and a lot of what they try and do with the levels are the big broad brushstrokes. It's all architecturally based. It's all attempting to sort of tell the story through the macro view, not the micro view, and it gives a far better, sort of impression of place by not having the detail than the opposite, which is effectively a small grey room, which is just filled with stuff. Far more stuff than you'd ever get in real life. I'm in a meeting room at my office now, and it's the plain grey walls with a desk. There's not an awful lot in here, and this is real life. So I certainly think you're right that a lot of people, a lot of modern developers, kind of go and they think that like bits and pieces of detail is what gives a level a sense of place, not the sort of wider macro view of it.
Yeah. I've heard a lot about Dark Souls. I haven't played it myself, but I know like a lot of it seems like a lot of really popular mappers are also big Dark Souls fans. So that's a pretty, you like that game a lot, I guess, then, right? You played that a lot?
I've played it a lot. It honestly kind of almost sort of repaired my faith in modern game developers.
Really?
Certainly, for example, the world of the first Dark Souls in itself is probably the single greatest bit of 3D architecture I kind of ever come across. There are no loading screens. It's just a single giant area, which is almost in a sort of corkscrew sense, where it goes up and down as much as it does sort of side to side. And it's very interconnected. So you'll kind of go from level A to level B over like a viaduct, past a dragon or whatever, and then you'll go down a lift and find yourself way back at the beginning. And I've not ever really played a game, almost since Doom, where I'd spend the time just thinking about how the level fit together. And quite deliberately, Dark Souls doesn't have a map in it, so you kind of have to remember it all yourself. And it has a very physical sense of place that I sort of remember from sort of playing the original, the original Dooms, and so much in the way that a lot of modern games don't have a physical sense of place. They kind of it's an infinite radial plane that people have put details in to make it interesting to look at. It doesn't feel like this sort of physical area that you can navigate and move around and kind of build up in your picture in your head of how it all fits together and what it's all there for. So if you haven't played it, I'd recommend it. It's pretty good.
I've heard it's really hard. Is it hard in the way Doom is, or is it like a different kind of hard? Like in Doom, it's like you're kind of it's a lot of projectile dodging, obviously, but it's like a lot of like multitasking too, because like you're trying to avoid projectiles while also like trying to get close enough to monsters to shoot them and aim at them and avoid taking damage. Is it like what do you do in Dark Souls? Like what is I understand it's like kind of like a third person type thing, but I don't know much more than that.
Yeah, it's a third person hacky type game. It's not hard. What it is rather kind of unforgiving. It has a sort of a point of view of this is how it should be played, and if you try and play it differently, you'll die.
Oh, okay.
And the way that it is played is a little bit different to, I think, a lot of other games. Generally speaking, in most melee games, the trick to beating an enemy is to kill it before it can kill you. So you get in there fast, you hit it fast, and it dies before you are able, basically you kill it before it can hit you.
Okay.
Dark Souls is basically the complete opposite. As in, you are generally slower than most of your enemies' attacks. So if you try to attack first, they will get in before you do, and then you die. So generally what you're meant to do is to kind of bait the enemy into attacking you, then either block the attack or dodge it and counterattack. And that's kind of the core gameplay loop of how it works.
Oh, okay.
But because we're in this modern world where people approach games at 1,000,000 miles an hour and they think they can just charge forwards and play, what you'll see people do it, and there's a mate of mine who does this, and it's so infuriating to watch him because he thinks the game's terrible because he can't get past the first level, because he will just run up to the first enemy and just button bash attack. I'm like, no, dude, you need to block, you need to dodge. It's a counter-attack game. And he's like, that's boring. I don't want to play that. And so he fails because he has a complete inability to not attack first. And that's all there is to playing Dark Souls. Just don't attack first. It's amazing how many people struggle to get their heads around that when they first play the game. And that alone is why people find it difficult.
It's funny how simply you describe it, because I've heard so many people say, like, oh, this game is hard as shit. It's one of the hardest games ever. And you kind of like pretty summed it up pretty quickly, that it's just kind of like that simple concept. It's just hard to grasp right away.
Yeah, it's a game that requires patience. It's a lot like that's with the basic enemies. With the bosses, it's a similar kind of thing. It's waiting for an opening, taking one hit, and then running away. And that's kind of how you do it. If you just try and go in there and wail on them, you'll die instantly. And everyone goes, "Well, why did I die?" You know, and it's like, well, you're an idiot. You just stop being so impatient. Slow down. Just think a bit more about what you're doing. And it's funny, we've been talking like the last hour or so. I find myself keep coming back to the same things that I'm interested in games, going slowly, interesting architecture, not rushing through it. I think clearly it's a bit of a theme.
Yeah, but it's a good theme. And so like in Dark Souls, is that like is it a game that has like levels, or is it like is it kind of like hub based, or is it like almost like an MMORPG where you can just kind of go anywhere?
It's not open world, like Skyrim or something like that.
Right.
It has levels, and in fact, when you walk from one level to the next, it kind of the name of the level pops up and sort of in front of you. But there's no loading screens between them, so it's like you know those sort of WODs that people did when the limits were first removed, where they took every single level from like Doom 2 and put them all into a single giant map where you just kind of walk from one to the other. It's kind of a bit like that. Although there are multiple kind of ways in and out of the different levels, so you can create shortcuts. Yeah, for example, sort of level 4 can then be accessed from the opening level once you've opened up a shortcut to kind of go between them. And there's no fast travel or anything like that. So there's lots of like just navigating around it and working out how it all sort of fits together. So it's a continuous level-based world, I suppose you could call it.
Okay. All right, well that makes sense. So like, what's the plot of the game? Like, do you know, like, what are you trying to do in this game? I understand you're like you're just some sort of like adventurer and there's monsters. Like, what's the end goal of the game? What are we trying to do?
It's one of those games where all the interesting stuff, the whole story, the lore, the plot, all the main characters either died or went insane 3,000 years before you even turn up. And essentially, you rock up in the game world and everything's just ruined, and everyone's either left or they're effectively an undead ghoul, and you basically know nothing about what's going on. And you piece a whole of the plot is kind of piecing together what the hell happened and what it all means.
Oh, okay.
And I've heard it described as being like piecing through an archaeological dig. It's like there's a story behind everything, but the game doesn't tell you it. You kind of have to really pay attention to, why is this ruin here? What was it here for? I found priest robes in the corner. Perhaps it was a religious ruin. Its position might make sense. What was it used for? How did it fall into the overall plot? And the game, you kind of get the impression they wrote like tomes of story about it and then just didn't put 90% of it into the game because you wouldn't come across it. There are no cutscenes, there are a few, but they're all, they're not. You don't have massive amounts of dialogue. The only people you really meet are basically insane, so can't really give you much plot other than sort of jabbering at you about stuff. And so there's a very sort of, it's possibly one of the reasons why you go on YouTube and type in Dark Souls lore, and there's 100 videos with 10 million views each, because there's an awful lot of conjecture about what it actually means and how it all kind of ties together. In very kind of a similar way, you sort of get it, you play through the original Doom.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It seems a lot like Doom because I think there's a lot of debate on like what the actual story is for Doom. I think like I was actually thinking about that the other day. I wanted to get like a couple people together on this show and be like, what do you think the story is? And we'll just see like all the differences. Like tell me what you think Doom is, like the whole story behind it, and then we'll just try to like kind of like weed out what things are different and like try to kind of figure out what people's interpretations of it are. And like Doom is like the same way because when you play the first level for the first time, like you have a gun in your hand, and then you see a guy and you're like, oh, there's a guy over there, and then oh my god, he's starting to shoot at me. You don't even know who he is. It's just you don't really know what's going on, and like you just kind of have to decide what's going on for yourself based on what's happening. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's sort of very similar, and it's an interesting one. It's like you think of, for example, episode 1, mission 1. It's called the hangar. If you actually think about it, it looks nothing like a hangar at all. I mean, there's nothing about that whatsoever. But you also sort of can't help but wonder, was there any kind of consideration at some point when I think it was Romero that made the level.
Yes.
When he was sort of thinking about how it fits together, was there a little bit that's kind of refers back to the hangar, like the courtyard over to the right when you first sort of go in, that has the kind of the gunk in the middle of it? I always felt like, was that some kind of helipad originally that they thought a big H in the floor was a bit obvious, so, or maybe past the line depth limit, so they just made it a kind of a pool of gunk. And E1M1 is kind of a good example because it changed so much over time. We played kind of the alpha versions or the rest of it, but Doom itself is sort of fascinating to think through how the levels sort of are supposed to if they are even supposed to represent what they're called, sort of what the background is of them, because we know that at one point, when the game was originally envisioned, there was a very, very definitive background to the whole thing. You read the Doom Bible, and it's this level exists because it does A, B, and C, and there is a very, very specific story behind all of it. And it kind of becomes a bit of an archaeological dig in itself to look at what there is left over that we got in the final game and sort of think, how much of that actually is just them trying to come up with something interesting, and how much of that actually does have narrative points to it, and is supposed to sort of tell a story, more than just, it looks cool or whatever.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a lot to think about because, like, if you think of like, there is, there was like, did you see that thread that came up like maybe a month ago? Somebody found this article by this guy who wrote about how Doom is not art, and he wrote like this kind of this angry, mean review about Doom, about how like all the levels are just kind of like they're just all these ambiguous tech bases and they don't really mean anything. So like, for example, in Computer Station, why is this filled with green slime? Like, where are the computers? We don't even know what's the point of this building. And like in Doom 2, there's like the waste tunnels. Like, where are the waste tunnels in this map? And so like it is kind of like, it's almost like a little disingenuous in that way. But I actually kind of like, I don't know, there's goods and bads to it because it leaves a lot of things open to interpretation. And it does make it kind of fun to think about. Are you familiar with Doom the Way It Did, that project?
I'm familiar with it, but I've never played it. It's on my long-to-play list.
Oh, okay. Well, the concept behind that was to design, to remake the IWAD in such a way that would copy the style, that would mimic the mapping style of John Romero, Sandy Peterson, and Tom Hall, without actually paying homage to the actual like maps and rooms and stuff in it. So you would kind of like, we spent a lot of time studying how what are the little like idiosyncrasies of these mappers' mapping style. Like, do they use these types of textures on these types of walls, and like there's a lot of like abstract shapes and stuff, and there's not a lot of like realistic furniture that you would normally see. Like how like in some POIs there's realistic couches and computer desks and stuff. Like you wouldn't make anything like that. You would just try to like copy the style so that like if, for example, the maps are designed in such a way that you could kind of integrate them seamlessly into the original iWAD, and you wouldn't think any differently. Like, you would believe that those maps came from those people. That was like kind of the mission statement for that WAD, and that's generally what happened. Is that like we kind of had to, even though people named maps certain ways, the maps didn't actually look like what they described them to be, and that was like kind of part of the exercise. It was a pretty cool concept.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will definitely check it out. You also, I'll tell you, on the names of the maps, you kind of, much in the keeping with Doom, they I think a good name of a map gives kind of a slightly abstract impression of what the atmosphere of the map will be, without necessarily just being a factual description of what happens. I mean, like something like the waste tunnels talked about earlier. You read the waste tunnels, and you know it's going to be dark and claustrophobic, at least at points. And lo and behold, it is. I mean, it's not. There aren't like torrents of sewage flowing around. It's not anything like that. But it sums up what the sensation is of playing the map, and it's one of those things that picking a good map name is surprisingly difficult, actually, to kind of just get the essence of what the map is without being too weird or too overt.
Yeah, that's true. I do. I've been thinking about that more and more lately, especially because lately it seems like people like to make maps that are just kind of, well, at least like last year or so, there was a lot of speed maps and stuff. So a lot of people were just kind of naming their maps whatever, and they would like use like stupid puns or just like these really exhausting long names that really have nothing to do with anything, or they were intentionally just trying to be funny most of the time. But I thought I put a lot of attention into like what maps are supposed to be named, and using the iWADs as like kind of an example. There's usually like one defining area in that map, and that is like the title of the map. So like, for example, the Crusher. Like, there's a Crusher in that map, and maybe the rest of the map has nothing to do with being a Crusher, but there's one particularly memorable moment of that map, which is crushing that spider mastermind under that giant Crusher. That should be the name of the map.
Yeah.
And,
or in my case, the single Hell Knight, because I originally played that map on I'm Too Young to Die because I was terrible at Doom when I was 8 years old.
Is that really what it does? A single Hell Knight?
Yeah, it's not much of a threat.
That's ridiculous. They could have at least put like a Mancubus or something. Well, I guess they couldn't have because they waited for Dead Simple for that.
Yeah.
That's silly. I had no idea. I haven't really played much of Doom 2 on different skill levels. I'm pretty much a ultraviolence only guy.
Yeah,
ultraviolence and blast.
Yeah, I think it's one Hell Knight on easy, and then medium on Heavy Plenty. It's like 6 Hell Knights. It's actually quite funny watching them all like mill around on this one Crusher, and it's like, realistically, they could just come down the stairs, but no, impassable line death is stopping them.
Yeah. But yeah, I put a lot of it. I've been thinking more about like map names and stuff too, and I kind of like those like little subtle, well, not subtle, but like just a one word that kind of defines the one particular moment of the map, or like something that's like really location based. Like, something that kind of bothers me is some maps that are like named after that are usually just kind of like a descriptive word, like for example, E4M9 Fear. Like, that's kind of whatever. That doesn't really. I kind of like the more like location based type maps, like Downtown or Industrial Zone or like Blood Falls or something like that. I don't know. So something that's kind of like kind of tells what the map is really about, and not just kind of like a random descriptive word that can be pretty much applied to anything.
Yeah, completely. In fact, when I first played episode 4, which was years after I played the original, I was really disappointed in the names. They're just like, they're just random Bible quotes. I mean, it gives you it actually really undermines giving episode 4 a sense of place. That they're just, they could be abstract locations with abstract names, that there's no discernible plot to the episode. In fact, of all the episodes, it's the one I played the least, just because it just feels like a bunch of random maps to me. It doesn't. I don't get any sense of place or progression or atmosphere playing them, because it kind of was just a bunch they added on because they needed to for the '95 release.
Yeah, and it's a shame too because most of the levels are pretty cool, and like the orange sky really ties everything together too. But I share a similar experience. I've only played it a few times, and I honestly do not remember the names of any of the maps, except I remember the first one is Hell Beneath, but that's pretty much it. And E4M9 is Fear. I think I know the names of all the maps, like Unto the Cruel and like and Hell Followed and all that stuff, but I don't know what maps they're applied to. I just remember the names.
Yeah, I mean they're cool names. They're all very cool Bible quotes. But you're right. They don't tell you anything about the map. It's just someone in it went, "What on earth are we going to call these?" And someone went, "Let's pick weird Bible quotes." Go, yes, we'll do that, and that's it. That's as much thought as went into it.
Yeah. And it stinks. In community projects, people put a lot of attention into the names. Like they like to be able to name their own maps. I wonder if that was like a problem when they were like creating that episode. They're like, "Oh, I want to make this map, and I want to call it, the courtyard or something." And well, that's a Doom 2 map, but I want to call it the courtyard or something. And then they were like, "Nope, we decided we're doing all Bible quotes. Sorry, no identity to your map whatsoever."
It's funny you say that about the community maps. I'm kind of working on the Confinement 256 community WOD at the moment.
Oh, okay.
I'm kind of helping tie it all together. And a bunch of people have submitted maps for that they haven't named. Here's my contribution or whatever. And I always find that a bit weird. It's like, yeah, it's only 2x6 by 2x6, but surely you have some sense of like what it is you're trying to say with the map. And you want to at least kind of put some sort of stamp on it. But yeah, quite a few people are just like, "Oh, here's my 256 map." So I'm almost tempted to name them myself, just because I don't want them to go unnamed.
Yeah, well, yeah, you don't want to put like you don't want to have like one of the CWILV graphics where it just says untitled like in the intermection text. That's kind of boring. But yeah, I really appreciate a really good name, and that's like something that was annoying to me when because I used to host a couple community projects myself, and some people would pick like really wacky names just to be silly, so they would make a map called like Dr. Bizarro's Wonderland, and I'm just like, come on, man, let's do something cool. And it's just like it seems disingenuous to like the kind of map it is, and like it belittles the context of the entire WOD and trying to create like some sort of a narrative for the entire project. So like when I made Mutiny, for example, I only made, it was a 16 map project, but I only made a few of the map slots where you could pick the name. But I pre-named some of the map slots, and I wanted people to like make a map that filled in that particular map, that map title, something that kind of like worked with that, just so I could make something that was kind of, it was important to me that I made something that was consistent and like kind of narrative driven. That was like one of the goals for me.
It's an art form though, to get it right.
Yeah, it was fun working with a lot of people though. That is cool. Like I really do love the idea of community projects, and I think there's a lot of potential in it. It's amazing how active it is. There's so many people pitching community projects, and only a handful of them take off. But when they do, like there's a lot of great results that come out of it, and there's just so much stuff to play.
Yeah, I think also it's a lot less daunting to be part of something bigger than it is to kind of stand by yourself and go, "Here is my single release."
Yeah.
Instead of if the community people will play community WODs more than I think just random individual releases. Like certainly individual maps. I mean, Mega WODs is kind of different, but if all you got in you is to make the one map, being as part of a community project just kind of feels a lot less isolating, I think, than just sticking it out there and letting it disappear into the ether of id games.
Yeah, it's very true. I know from experience, just even sometimes what I will do is I'll save like a bunch of WODs in a row, and like most of them are single player level or just single levels, and it does like maybe if it only takes like 5-10 minutes to play, that's like it's kind of annoying to like play a single map that only takes like 5 minutes and then close out of it and then have to open up a new WOD. It's just I don't know. There's just I guess you kind of it is more interesting on the player's perspective to play something that is part of something bigger. And I guess mappers understand that, so they prefer to make a map that's part of a big community project than to just make a single map on its own.
Yeah, definitely. Although, funnily enough, I don't know if you actually have been reading the Confinement 256 thread, but it wasn't actually meant to be a community project at all. So the guy who sort of founded it, a guy called XYZZY01, originally sort of just posted this little status update going, what's the best way of telling people about a megawatt I'm working on? And I just sort of said, here are the usual things. You need a bit of description, source board, screenshots, whatever. So then he sort of posts, here's my map. It's going to be a 20 map sort of mini megawatt, I suppose, based on the 256 by 256 kind of idea. I'm going to release it on June 7th. Here are some pictures of what I'm sort of working on, or June 17th, actually. Or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then sort of people were sort of posting a few things, it looks good, or whatever. And then someone, I can't remember who, kind of went, okay, well, here's my map, and sort of posted it. Or all a bit like, it's not actually a community one. And then other people just started adding maps. It's like, I guess it's a community one now.
That's silly. So what is that project about? I don't even, 256, is that the size of the map? Do they have to be?
That's the size of the map, yeah. So every level takes place within a square room, which is at most 256 by 256 map units. We're going infinite height. You can go up and down as far as you like, but no further outside of that. And we've got 30 maps so far, and it's amazing what people have been able to come up with, even with those crazy limitations.
Yeah, limitations really do bring out the best in people sometimes. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do when it comes to limitations.
Totally. I think that's also why, might be one reason why people like mapping in vanilla. So, not at least limit removing, because somehow not having all the power of ACS and Decorate and all the sort of the advanced stuff that the source boards can do kind of just makes it easier to come up with something interesting when you don't kind of feel smothered by possibilities.
Yeah, it does that for me. I like the idea of I don't personally like working on vanilla that much because I'm so used to working with limit removing, and what I often do is I make, if I'm working in vanilla, I'll make a map that's just above vanilla capabilities, and then I'll just try, and then I just have to work on scaling everything back, and it's just a nightmare because you have something that you think looks really cool, and then you have to rework it and make it look like something completely different, and it kind of stinks when that happens. But as far as limitations, for me, I like working with limitations because if I can max everything out that I can do, it makes me feel like my map is complete. And that's that's kind of attractive to me because if you work on something that's if I were to work on a Z-Doom project, there's no limits to what you can do. So if I'm going to create a Z-Doom project, it's going to need scripting, it's going to need new weapons, it's going to need new monsters, it's going to need cutscenes and some kind of new gameplay mechanic and new status bar. I have to. It feels to me it feels incomplete to not make use of every feature that's available. And that's because it's annoying to me when I play a Z-Doom map and it's only Z-Doom because they wanted to use Doom in Hexen format and there's really nothing else holding it back. And and they're using Doom in Hexen format just to make these types of doors that open a little faster than normal or something. And it's what are you doing? Why don't you just use what you have available? Why are you using Z-Doom? Why do I have to use Z-Doom to play your map if it's just this? So I like to work with I like limitations because if you do everything that's within your power, which is pretty easy to do because there's only so much you can do, it really does make you feel like you did the best that you did and you really optimize your map the best you can.
Yeah, although I am actually going to have to slightly disagree with you in that I think one of the issues in the community when it comes to stuff like Z-Doom and GZ-Doom is this feeling that if you're going to use it, you have to make use of everything. And I actually strongly disagree with that, because I'm a purist when it comes to the gameplay elements of Doom. I'm not a massive fan of lots of different enemies or different weapons or stuff like that. But there are a few really, really powerful features that are only remotely available in the advanced stuff. And if your map just makes use of one of those really well, then I believe it's justified to target that sore spot. To give you a bit of an example, the confinement 256 map that I'm making, which it's just it's a very, very small map. I'm using specifically one GZ Doom feature, which is a line portal, which is basically where it makes the room look bigger, because how portals work in like Portal, for example. You walk through one place and you kind of come out the other. And the way that you can build it in GZ Doom is the player doesn't know it's a portal. So I've been constructing a kind of puzzle map where the walls move around and the whole thing looks an awful lot bigger than 256 by 256, because you're actually looking at repeats of stuff. And the room kind of shifts on itself and it bounces around itself and all that sort of stuff. And that's literally just using one feature. There's no custom enemies or custom graphics or sprites or anything like that. But I couldn't have done that in anything other than a modern version of GZ Doom. I don't even think Z-Doom supported line portals in this way. Yeah. And I personally don't think there are enough maps out there where people just kind of go, that one advanced feature or those two advanced features, I'm going to really run with that. I'm not going to feel like I have to use everything and get kind of snowed under all the new features, but really kind of make really good use of just a couple of the new things. And I'd love to see more of that actually out there. I'd really like to see people, not just kind of feel that if they're using Z-Doom, they have to use everything, because they really don't. Because there's a lot of stuff that has a lot of sort of opportunity in it that hasn't really been explored properly.
That's I can actually get behind that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I get what you're saying. You want to it would be cool if people were really take advantage of one particular feature. And I guess that makes sense in the way of gameplay mods, for example. They're taking pretty heavy advantage of decorate and stuff like that. And yeah, so I guess Z-Doom isn't limited to having, well, not, I wouldn't say limited, but you don't have to use everything. I guess that does make sense. But yeah, I guess that was just kind of, I don't know. I didn't really think about it that much. That's a very smart way of approaching it. Is kind of picking one really strong feature and really making that the dominant part of your map. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
You're certainly not the only person who sort of feels like that. There was actually in the very, very first post for Confinement 256, the guy who made it did it in UDMF format. And I'm trying to remember why exactly he did it in UDMF. There was a good reason. He basically wanted to use some map info to just kind of control the maps a bit more, and sort of the flow of them. And the very first reply was, you were wrong to do this. You should not have used UDMF if all you're using is map info. You should have just used, boom or limit removing, and that's it. And I sort of felt like, well, no, if he wants to use UDMF because he wants to use map info, then he's allowed to. You don't have to use every single feature in Z-Doom to make it a valid Z-Doom project. But it's not an unusual point of view, at least in Doom World anyway, that basically the only justification for using something beyond PR Boom Plus is that it uses a gazillion features that PR Boom Plus kind of couldn't support. Yeah. Whereas I'm possibly because I've never really got the point of using Boom in this day and age. It's either use the original engine or don't. Simply using a slightly better than original engine, but not that much better for some weird historical reason, I don't really get that logic particularly. So I do limit removing or UDMF, and that's basically all I work in. But I totally get that I'm not usual in the community, and I have a slightly unusual stance on that. And it's certainly an interesting thing.
Well, your reasoning is strong, and that's what's important, because I think some people will want to do things a certain way, and then they don't really know why they do it, or they can't explain it. And I think I think your reasoning is completely fair. Um, I am more of a PR boom nerd myself, but it's because I'm fascinated with demo recording and playing back demos and stuff. And
Yeah, which
PR
is the
boom is
big
very
benefit.
powerful for something like that. But yeah, I don't really use much ZDoom or GZDoom, and when I really think about it, I really don't have a real reason why, other than that I like to record my own demos and I like to share my FDA demos with other people, which is and ZDoom and GZDoom have their own format for something like that, and FDA and like the .lmp files are just the more common thing. So I just use that. But that's mostly my reason behind it. But I also like PR Boom does kind of like it has like that strong demo compatibility, but it also is pretty true to what I believe to be the like original like Doom experience, like kind of playing it with like the original rules. Because when you play like Z Doom and GZ Doom by default, they have a lot of things enabled, like like non-infinitely tall actors and things like that. And even though like I know that's like not a very important feature to have, but it's something that I'm used to, like infinitely tall actors and like all the original things. So I don't like to see that those rules removed. I just believe those to be like actual conditions of the game, and that's just kind of how the game works. But that's just me.
Yeah, certainly when it comes to sort of demos and speedrunning, the complete reliability that you stick on a comp level and you know it'll work is a massive benefit of PR Boom Plus. And I'm not knocking the port for sort of that reason. It's more the sort of feel that, because that is sort of the pure experience and that's what people want, then that's great. It's that somehow the more advanced stuff gets frowned upon a little bit. There is a slightly kind of elitist feel I almost get from Doom World, that people are like, oh, if someone produces a Z Doom World, you kind of get the sense of, oh, I guess I'll push myself to play it in Z Doom, even though I can turn on all of the different things that basically makes it play exactly like PR Boom. Plus, I have to load up a different source file. I feel so dirty. It's not. There is a kind of reticence to it that I think is a bit of a shame, personally.
But how you describe it is exactly how I feel. I do. I'm so committed to like PR Boom. I don't know what it is, but I love it. But I just love using the source port that I like to play with. And when I switch to Z Doom or GZ Doom, I feel like I'm playing something different. Like I'm feeling like a compromised version of Doom, and it's exactly the opposite, because it's just Doom with more features. But I don't know. It feels dirty to me. It does. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. It feels gross.
Well, personally, I only ever play in Chocolate Doom on a CRT, so I think you're a dirty advanced source port user anyway.
Yeah. Well, I use Chocolate Doom sometimes too, but yeah, it is primarily PR Boom. But I kind of like went on this for like the last year or two, I went on like this long quest to record demos of everything that I play. So like PR Boom has been appropriate for me, and I just have like this huge. I've been trying to like document this entire library of every WAD I've ever played. So I have like this huge list of demos in my folder, and it's only like after all of like I've played like almost every megawad, and well, at least every megawad released in like since like 2013 or so, and like a whole bunch of short episodes and single levels and stuff. And I have a batch file that plays all of the demos that I have in like a playlist. And I found another batch file online that'll shuffle those things so I can watch. So what I can do is I can run this batch file and I can watch my demos play in random order. So like every demo will just come up as like a new random map from some random megawatt. And that's kind of fun for me to do. And I do that for this Twitch stream actually, because we're talking right now, but we don't have any video or anything. So I just have these demos playing in the background so that people can watch gameplay that's going on while we're talking during the Twitch stream. And it's just like, it's kind of like watching like an actual Let's Play, except I'm not actually playing. They're just watching these demos that I've recorded. So it's my actual gameplay, but it's not live. But it was fun to do, to kind of set that up, because I have like probably like after all these demos I've recorded, like the time it would take to watch them all from start to finish could take like weeks.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much Doom levels out there, and there's so much stuff recorded, and like not to mention that like some of the maps I've played take me like 40 minutes to beat.
It does make me wonder how many people are watching the Twitch stream going, oh my god, he's a good multitasker. He's having this very in-depth conversation and playing amazingly. The guy's brilliant.
Yeah, that's one thing that's like, I always thought that was kind of weird, is that people will I do have an appreciation for people that play Doom and talk at the same time, because that's something I certainly can't do. I'll play Doom, but my mouth is shut the entire time. I just can't talk. But I don't know. It's just that kind of level of multitasking is kind of weird for me. All my attention is devoted to the game, so I can't really talk and play at the same time. So like it never really made sense to me to watch like Let's Plays and stuff, because if you watch them on YouTube, there's people that will like, they'll play a game and they'll talk and they'll just like talk about their day, and they won't talk about the game, and they'll like talk about, or they'll just like eventually like 15 minutes into it they'll just stop talking, and then, or they'll like hum along with the music, and it's just like, why are we even listening to your voice at all? It's just I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I don't like to talk while playing a game, so it makes sense to just have like a demo recording and then talk over that.
Yeah, I'm the same. Even if I'm playing something like sat on the couch or something, my wife's sat next to me, she'll like ask me a question, and I'll reply like 10 minutes later, because that's how long it's taken her sort of question to get into my brain, me to work out what I'm going to say, and then to reply. And I don't even notice it's like 10 minutes has gone. She'll be like, I asked you that ages ago.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's how long it takes. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll do that. I do that sometimes. My wife will do that too, because she'll play like not as much anymore, but she used to play like Candy Crush on her phone and stuff, and I'll like ask her a question and she won't answer me till like 5 minutes later. And I'm like, does it really take you that long to process that question? It's a pretty simple question.
Yeah, like the CPU's running at 100%. It just takes ages
yes.
to have it run through.
But that's how you know you're having a good gameplay experience, is when you like commit all of your brain energy to it.
Yeah, that is very true.
All right. All right. Well, we've been talking about like an hour and a half. It was pretty fun talking to you. I appreciate you talking.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you telling me all about your WAD and all the stuff that you're interested in. And I didn't know that you were involved with that 256 confinement project. That's pretty cool.
Well, it's coming out on the original guy's birthday, which is June 17th, I think. So look for it then.
Okay, cool. That's cool, man. All right, so you made Foresight. Or do you have any other projects that you're currently working on besides that? Besides that community project you're involved in, do you have other projects that you want to promote so people know what you're up to?
That's kind of the main one, because it's taking all of my stuff. I did also make something for the plain old Doom 2, which was kind of the community war that's sort of slowed down a bit, actually, where everyone kind of has to make something in a really, really basic style, which I completely messed up by making something way too over-detailed, then had to go back through it and tear out all of my hard work, which was really, really gut-wrenching. But at some point, I might actually just release that as kind of a bit of a standalone. But no, just the 256 is the one that's kind of taking up all my attention at the moment.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's cool. All right. Do you have like a YouTube channel or like a Twitch stream or something that people can find you on?
No, nothing like that. I'm still quite old school. I occasionally watch Twitch and go, oh, that looks fun, and then go back to making Doom maps on my little old laptop.
Okay. Well, you're on Doom World, so if people want to talk to you, they can find you that way.
Yeah, I'm on that.
All right, cool.
Far too much.
All right, man. It was good talking to you. I do have like one quick announcement before we wrap this up. On the last episode, I talked to Fonz, and he seconded Doom Kid's suggestion that he wanted to do this episode where we talked with the guys who made Eon DM and Don't Be a Bitch, so we could talk about like their map design stuff. And I heard you, and I'm interested in doing something like that. And it just so happens that a few weeks ago I got a message from DK saying that he talked to the guys that are part of that project and him too, and they're interested in doing it. But I don't know. I don't know if any of you pay attention to how often I talk to DK, but which is probably not many of you. But I know DK knows that like pretty much 95 to 100% of the interactions I've ever had with him were pretty unpleasant. Usually involve him like trying to make me look like an asshole. So I told it. So when I got this message from DK saying that he wanted to do something like this, I reminded him that that's something that's kind of a concern of mine. And when I did that, you can kind of, if you wouldn't believe it, but he resorted to name calling and all sorts of shit, and it just kind of went pretty unpleasant from there. So I do. It's just if we did a show like that, I would like to do a show like that, but I don't want people to come with the expectation that we're going to be talking about mapping, and instead we're just going to be it's just going to be me fighting with Decay. It's going to be alienating for the people involved, and it's not going to be interesting to the listeners. So with that said, I would be interested in doing a show with those guys under one of two conditions, and that's if for you guys listening and you would like to see a show like this happen, get with Decay, tell him that he's got to own up to his bullshit, and I'm going to need his will and cooperation before, during, and after the show, because I just don't want there to be any kind of fighting during the show when people are expecting to learn about mapping. And the other option is I can do it without him. Okay, so that sounds pretty fair, right? Right? Don't you think so, Bauul?
Yeah, that sounds very fair to me.
All right. So Bauul is on Team 40 ounce. All right. So I'll try and work on that in the future. I hope you guys I hope you guys hear it, and we'll try and figure this out. And hopefully Decay will cooperate with me, because I don't really have a problem with him, but I know he does with me, and I'm not really sure what it's about. And hopefully we can work it out, and then we'll be able to talk about this without fighting over it. Okay? All right, so thank you, Space Marines, for listening, and have a good night.